A group of delinquents is bullying a young man under a bridge, but unfortunately for them, they have picked the wrong target. Jiro is not afraid at all. Instead, he talks back sharply enough to make them lose their temper. The leader, a scar-faced thug with an earring, thinks that having more people will be enough to pressure him. But the moment one of his men throws a punch, Jiro calmly dodges, sweeps his leg, and sends him crashing to the ground. He even challenges both of them to come at him together, then mocks them for only being brave when they move in groups. The insult lands hard, and a few moments later, the thugs are beaten badly enough to run away. After dealing with the troublemakers, Jiro turns to a calico cat and a black crow nearby. As it turns out, these two animals were the ones who told him that the delinquents often gathered here. To Jiro, animals are not just creatures making meaningless sounds. He can truly understand and speak with them as if they were people. The cat worries that the thugs may hold a grudge against him, while the crow adds that Jiro's intense glare is probably why people keep picking fights with him. Hearing that, Jiro immediately snaps. He pulls off his jacket and threatens to turn the crow into roasted bird, but in the end, he simply picks up his bag and leaves. Before going, he reminds both of them not to scatter trash everywhere. Through this short exchange, it becomes clear that Jiro is not some polished, shining hero. He is blunt, hot-tempered, and has the kind of face that makes people think he is about to start a fight. But deep down, he genuinely cares about animals, and this strange ability to communicate with them will soon pull his life in a direction he is not prepared for. After returning to his family's traditional home, Jiro is immediately scolded by his grandfather for getting into another fight. His grandfather criticizes him for using ninjutsu on pointless trouble, while Jiro argues back without backing down. Instead of giving him a normal lecture, his grandfather throws two kunai at him. He then takes out a black ninja sword and explains that it is a family treasure passed down from the Edo period. He reminds Jiro not to bring shame to the Azuma family, but Jiro only smirks and calls it a dull fake sword. To prove that the blade is far from useless, his grandfather swings it lightly through the air. The slash is so powerful that it cuts away part of the roof, leaving Jiro shocked and furious. After that very expensive lesson, his grandfather says he has a neighborhood meeting that night and will be home late, then tells Jiro to lock the door carefully. Soon after, the same black crow from earlier rushes to Jiro with urgent news. Jiro immediately runs into the forest, following the crow's directions. Among the dry leaves, he finds a black cat lying motionless in a pool of blood, barely breathing and almost completely unresponsive. Although Jiro does not know what happened, he decides to give first aid immediately. At the same time, the story opens another layer of mystery. In a dark space, a voice calls out to Reigo, the black calamity star that devours the sun, and demands that he lend his power. In that strange inner world, Reigo appears as a terrifying shadow, but he immediately refuses. The mysterious voice threatens that if he will not submit, then he must die. The scene ends with a sharp green eye opening, leaving the sense that the cat Jiro just saved is no ordinary stray. Later, Rago wakes up in Jiro's room with his body carefully bandaged. Jiro brings him water and asks for his name. The cat sneers, saying that even if he gave his name, Jiro would not understand him anyway. But Jiro understands him perfectly, which terrifies the cat enough to make him hide under the bed. Only after realizing that Jiro has no demonic aura and is truly human does Rago calm down. And when Jiro uses a can of pate to lure him out, Rago reluctantly agrees to cooperate. While eating, Reigo insists that he is not a cat, but a Mononoke who has lived for a very long time. He explains that Mononoke often blend into human society or hide deep in forests. He was awakened from a long sleep by a strange group of Mononoke and pressured to join them. When he refused, they attacked him together. Jiro asks why Rago would not go with them. Rago answers that he hates those who rely on the strength of others, gathering in groups just to show off. That answer immediately reminds Jiro of himself, since he has just dealt with a group of thugs who acted the same way. Reigo assumes an ordinary human would never believe such a strange story, but Jiro only thinks for a moment and smiles. He says that there are people in the world who can talk to animals, so the existence of Mononoke is not that strange. This answer leaves Reigo deeply surprised. Back in the forest where Reigo was found collapsed in blood, the place is no longer quiet. It has become the investigation site of a secret organization. At point E16, a red-haired girl named Kusumi examines the remaining bloodstains while reporting through an earpiece to Section Chief Shiba. She confirms that the traces definitely belong to Reigo, the black calamity star they have been searching for. Not only that, there is also a broken trail of demonic aura in the area, suggesting that either Reigo or the one who attacked him may still be nearby. Shiba realizes the situation is more complicated than expected, and says he will reorganize the search team. Kusumi, however, remains confident and says she can handle things by herself. At that moment, behind the serious investigation, a mysterious figure slowly fades into the air, leaving behind a sinister smile. Meanwhile, at Jiro's house, Rago is being cleaned up after his brutal beating. Jiro is surprised to see that Rago's wounds are healing at an abnormal speed. This makes him start believing that the black cat in front of him really is an ancient Mononoke, even though he had initially thought Rago might simply be a delusional stray. While bathing Rago, Jiro remembers Nachi, the old white dog who lived with his family when he was small. To him, Nachi was almost like a grandmother. In his childhood memories, Jiro was often bullied. Every time he returned home, he would be covered in scratches, dirt, and painful emotions. But Nachi was always there, gently taking him to bathe, as if she were not only washing away the dirt on his body, but also easing the sadness he carried inside. To Jiro, Nachi was not just a pet. She was family, kind, warm, and deeply understanding. Nachi once told him that she was glad he was there, because thanks to him, she could bathe whenever she wanted. But if he ever had the chance, he should also help others besides her, because that was surely something only Jiro could do. Those words were simple, but they became one of the reasons Jiro finds it hard to ignore any life that needs saving. That night, when Rago thinks Jiro has fallen asleep, he quietly prepares to leave. He knows he is not fully recovered, and although he wants to repay Jiro, he cannot stay and drag an ordinary human into the dangerous world of Mononoke. But just as he is about to slip away, Rago realizes that Jiro is still awake. The figure lying in the bed is only a rabbit plush toy being used as a substitution technique. Jiro asks where Rago thinks he is going with injuries like that, but Rago coldly brushes him off. He says it has nothing to do with Jiro and even denies that Jiro saved him, claiming he was prepared to die and did not need anyone acting like his benefactor. Those words make Jiro furious. He grabs Rago and shouts that Rago has no right to treat his own life so lightly, but Rago snaps back, warning Jiro not to shout at him or he will bite out his throat. He insists that he is a Mononoke, a man-eating monster who lives in a completely different world from Jiro. Before the argument can go further, the mysterious figure from earlier appears. This time, he takes the form of a large man wearing sunglasses. He laughs as he looks at Jiro like an easy meal delivered to his door. He transforms his arm into claws and lunges forward to eat him, but Rago immediately pushes Jiro away and takes the attack himself. Even though Rago keeps saying they belong to different worlds, his actions prove that he is not as heartless as he claims. After that, Rago flees into the forest, deliberately drawing the Mononoke away from Jiro's home to keep him from being dragged deeper into the danger. In the dark forest, Rago is still weak and has not recovered his full strength, so the Mononoke quickly catches up to him. The enemy mocks the once feared Black Calamity Star for falling so low, then reveals that he spent a great deal of effort breaking Rago's seal. His goal is to force Rago to follow him. If Rago refuses to submit, he will take his power by force. Rago still refuses and prepares to fight to the death, but the enemy is too strong. With a single charge, the situation becomes deadly. At that exact moment, Jiro suddenly appears, blocks the attack with his ninja sword, and cuts off the monster's arm to save Rago. Rago is both shocked and angry. He calls Jiro an idiot for risking his life, but Jiro shouts back that if Rago dies now, then saving him in the first place would have been meaningless. Even when Rago tells him this is not some childish fight, Jiro raises his sword and refuses to retreat. He declares that there is no such thing as a foolish reason to save someone. He was the one who saved Rago, so he will not abandon him halfway through. It is stubborn, but that very stubbornness makes Rago look at Jiro differently for the first time. The person standing before him is no longer just a weak human interfering in Mononoke affairs. He is someone who has chosen to stand on the same battlefield. However, the gap in strength is still too great. The enemy Mononoke reveals his true form, becoming a huge horned monster. He realizes that Jiro carries the blood of ninja, but that does not shake him at all. Jiro grips his ninja sword, understanding that if he runs now, both he and Rago will die, so he chooses to attack first. Jiro leaps into the air, trying to counterattack, but the monster reads his move immediately. In an instant, the creature's arm pierces straight through Jiro's chest, sending blood spraying through the air. The Mononoke praises Jiro's ninja skills, saying they are not bad, but coldly declares that everything is over. Looking at Jiro as he lies dying, the monster generously offers the body to Rago, telling him to eat the boy and regain his energy. Rago admits that eating Jiro could indeed restore his strength, but the thing he hates most is being ordered around by someone else. To Rago, being forced to obey is more unbearable than being left nearly powerless. Instead of eating Jiro, Rago decides to repay his debt in his own way. He looks at the human boy collapsed in front of him and tells Jiro to take him in. Immediately after that, Rago's body turns into a violent mass of black energy and rushes straight into the open wound in Jiro's chest, transferring his life and power into him. This is no longer a simple rescue. It is Rago betting everything to keep Jiro alive. The human who once pulled him from a pool of blood in the forest is now being pulled back from the edge of death by Rago himself. Elsewhere in the forest, Kusumi has witnessed everything and immediately reports to Shiba. Shiba orders every member to move to the scene at once. Meanwhile, the enemy Mononoke is furious after seeing Rago give his power to a human. A black storm surrounds Jiro and wraps around his body in the darkness of the forest. When the black aura finally fades, Jiro stands up as if his chest had never been pierced. The fatal wound has completely disappeared. In its place, a circular mark has appeared on his chest. Jiro still does not understand what has happened, but the Mononoke immediately sends him flying flying into the air. This time, however, something inside him has changed. As he falls, Reigo's voice speaks from within him, telling him to take down the giant monster first. Jiro focuses the power he has just awakened and launches forward at terrifying speed. The monster cannot react at all. Jiro's right eye turns bright gold, just like Reigo's. Black energy coils around his right arm, and with a single punch, he destroys the huge monster instantly. After the battle, Jiro stares at his own hand in shock. Then he looks down at the mark on his chest and calls Reigo's name, trying to understand what has happened. But before he can get an answer, a blade suddenly appears right next to his face. Kusumi emerges behind him and coldly orders him not to move or speak. Soon after, Shiba walks over calmly with a cigarette in hand. His relaxed expression makes him look less like someone hunting monsters and more like an office worker stopping by after a meeting to handle a supernatural incident. Jiro assumes they are allies of the monster he just fought, but Shiba denies it. With a single motion of his hand, a squad of armed soldiers in armor and gas masks appears and surrounds Jiro. Shiba introduces them as members of the Government Secret Intelligence Bureau. In other words, they are government officials. He then officially declares Jiro under arrest. Jiro angrily tries to resist, but before he can do anything, Kusumi strikes him hard on the back of the neck and knocks him unconscious. Shiba then orders his subordinates to take Jiro to an affiliated hospital for treatment and examination, because if Jiro were to die now, the situation would become extremely troublesome. He has become the vessel of the Black Calamity Star's power, a target for Mononoke, a subject under government surveillance, and a key figure in everything that is about to unfold. While unconscious, Jiro finds himself floating in a pure white space. Memories of Rago and the battle in the forest return one after another. Then Rago appears in front of him and points at Jiro's chest, where a small, bloody hole is still visible. Jiro wakes up in shock and realizes that he is lying in a hospital bed. His head is pounding, and for a brief moment, he tries to convince himself that everything was only a nightmare. But when he pulls up his shirt, the black sun mark on his chest immediately proves that everything really happened. Sitting beside him is Ichika, calmly scrolling through her phone. She tells him that he has been unconscious for a day and a half. But when Jiro asks where he is and who she is, Ichika does not bother answering. She simply calls Section Chief Shiba and reports that the subject has awakened. She has barely finished the report before casually asking her superior to buy mushroom-shaped chocolate and bamboo shoot snacks. At that exact moment, Rago appears in the form of a black cat, sitting right on top of Jiro's head while giving off dark energy. He immediately complains that Ichika has no cuteness at all. Not long after, Shiba walks into the room carrying a plastic bag, grumbling about Ichika hanging up on him. He observes Jiro and Rago, then concludes that Jiro's body has recovered very well. As for Rago, he is still cautious, but he does not seem to have any intention of attacking. Shiba then formally introduces himself and his subordinate. He explains that the government secret service originally came from the Oniwabanshu, a ninja organization that once served the shogunate during the Edo period. After the Meiji Restoration, the group began working for the new government, continuing to operate from the shadows while barely existing on official records. Their duties include gathering intelligence, controlling information, and monitoring or eliminating Mononoke that threaten humans. However, since the Mononoke have been relatively quiet lately, Shiba's section usually handles the protection of important figures or investigates dangerous organizations. The reason they appeared in the forest was because a few days earlier, one of the Secret Service's facilities had been attacked by Mononoke. The being sealed inside that facility was none other than Rago. Hearing this, Ichika immediately scolds Jiro for rushing in to save a dangerous Mononoke without understanding the full situation. Jiro refuses to back down, and the two quickly start arguing. Shiba has to cut them off and force everyone to focus on the most important issue. The truth is that Rago and Jiro are now in a state of assimilation. Their power and their lives have fused inside one body. Shiba lights a cigarette and coldly explains that the Secret Service does not currently know how to reverse this process. In other words, Jiro and Rago may have to continue living together until death. Even so, Shiba's organization has the resources to research a solution. They will also protect Jiro from the Mononoke now targeting Rago's power. Jiro is about to object, but Shiba immediately shuts down that hope by telling him that he has no right to refuse. Jiro's public records have already been processed so that he is officially listed as missing. The Secret Service is not an ally of justice, and it has no obligation to put Jiro's personal freedom above its mission. In other words, Jiro saved a black cat in the forest, woke up in a hospital bed, and discovered that his ordinary identity had already been erased. Shiba tells him that he will be transferred to another facility the next morning. Guards are posted outside, and towels and clothes have been prepared in the closet. After saying that, Shiba and Ichika leave the room, ignoring Jiro as he calls after them in confusion. In just a day and a half, Jiro has gone from an ordinary high school student to the host of the Black Calamity Star, a missing person on paper, and a target under the control of a secret government agency. His normal life has officially disappeared. Although they call it protection, the guarded door makes it feel far closer to imprisonment. Lying on the bed, Jiro grows more frustrated the more he thinks about it. Rago immediately immediately tells him not to trust these people. After all, the government secret service was the same organization that sealed him away for a long time. An organization capable of treating a Mononoke like a dangerous object has no obvious reason to treat a human fused with the Black Calamity Star kindly. On top of that, the attack on the facility and Raigo's release happened almost at the same time. No matter how Jiro looks at it, it does not feel like a coincidence. It feels as if someone had arranged everything in advance. Jiro is already angry that everyone has been deciding his fate for him since the moment he woke up. After hearing Raigo's warning, he decides that he will not simply lie there and wait. He declares that he will handle things himself first and worry about what happens afterward later. Raigo asks where he plans to go, but Jiro only tells him not to use his power without permission. Then he begins his escape from the hospital with a very direct strategy. Strike first, explain later. The two Secret Service agents guarding the door are quickly taken down. Jiro also releases the crows being kept nearby to create chaos, turning the hospital hallway into a sudden security disaster that nobody was ready for. Thanks to the crows drawing attention away, Jiro and Raigo successfully escape the hospital. Once outside, Jiro still keeps his promise and feeds the entire flock as a reward. Even while being hunted by the government and carrying a legendary Mononoke inside him, he still makes sure to repay the birds that helped him. When Raigo asks where they are going next, Jiro decides to return home. He cannot accept the idea of his grandfather suddenly receiving news that his grandson has gone missing without knowing what really happened. At the very least, Jiro wants to explain everything himself. But the moment he opens the door, Jiro sees his grandfather already waiting with a serious expression. Jiro is still trying to arrange a story about monsters, the government, and the fusion incident into something remotely believable. Before he can speak, his grandfather coldly tells him to shut up and follow him. The two of them go to an abandoned stadium under the sunset. Jiro still does not understand why this family conversation needs such a dramatic location. Then, without warning, his grandfather charges forward and strikes him, sending Jiro crashing to the ground. Only after that blow does his grandfather reveal the truth. He was once a member of the government secret service. Shiba has already told him everything, from the moment Jiro saved Raigo, to the wound through his chest, to the assimilation that turned him into a target. He also immediately recognizes the black cat beside Jiro as the Black Calamity Star. As Jiro's family, his grandfather believes that he must take responsibility for the disaster Jiro has caused. But his solution is not to bring Jiro back to the agency or ask for mercy. His solution is to kill both Jiro and Raigo with his own hands, then take his own life, so that this power will not fall into the hands of either the Secret Service or the Mononoke. His grandfather takes a fighting stance. Killing intent and dark energy rise around him, making it clear that his words are not empty threats. Jiro understands that talking will no longer work, so he prepares to fight back. The moment the battle begins, the difference in experience becomes obvious. His grandfather moves so quickly that Jiro can barely follow him. He lands precise blows one after another and throws Jiro to the ground. His grandfather explains that the Azuma family's martial arts have been refined over many generations. They are assassination techniques designed to kill both humans and Mononoke. What he once taught Jiro was only the self-defense version. What Jiro is facing now is the complete form. Even though his grandfather is clearly in pain over the thought of killing his own grandson, he decides to end it quickly so Jiro does not have to suffer any longer. But before the fatal blow can land, Raigo can no longer stand by. Ignoring Jiro's earlier order, Raigo releases dark energy and forms it into a giant demonic arm to block the attack. He warns Jiro that the old man in front of them truly intends to kill him. But just as Raigo tries to help, Jiro raises his own dark-covered arm and stops him. He shouts at Raigo not to interfere. Even after being beaten to the ground, Jiro is determined to face his grandfather himself. This is not only a battle for survival, it is also the answer he must give to his own family. At that moment, a childhood memory returns to him. Back then, Jiro once climbed a tall tree to save a kitten. He managed to hold the kitten, but almost fell. His grandfather caught him just in time. Afterward, his grandfather scolded him, but also patiently explained something important. Saving someone is a good thing, but kindness without strength and preparation can easily become recklessness. When Jiro was still a child and could not take responsibility for the consequences, it was fine to borrow someone else's help. And if nobody could help, then he had to accept that. Running into danger without thinking was not courage. Young Jiro was still too stubborn to listen. His grandfather simply patted his head and told him to become strong, both in body and in spirit. Back in the present, his grandfather reminds him that what lies ahead is no longer training or a child's fight. Jiro has entered a world where humans and Mononoke kill each other, a bloody path his grandfather never wanted him to walk. Even with his face covered in blood, Jiro says that he knows his actions were reckless, but he does not regret saving Raigo. The consequences came from his own choice, so he will carry them himself. Hearing this, his grandfather is both angry and heartbroken. He calls Jiro a complete fool and unleashes a powerful strike. Jiro takes the blow head on, and the impact sends dust flying as he is thrown back. When the dust clears, Jiro is bleeding again, while Raigo anxiously calls his name. But Jiro slowly stands back up. His whole body is wounded, yet his eyes do not waver. His grandfather realizes that Jiro is using the act of enduring his attacks to prove his resolve. He warns him not to confuse determination with arrogance. Jiro also understands that his own strength is still not enough. The man standing before him is the complete version of the Azuma family's martial arts, while he has only learned the basics. Then Jiro remembers his grandfather's old lesson. Those who are not yet strong enough should borrow strength from others. He turns to Rago and declares that he will borrow his power. He asks Rago to move in rhythm with him. Rago is briefly surprised but quickly agrees. Dark energy begins to flow from Rago and cover Jiro's body. Jiro says that, in his eyes, humans, beasts, and Mononoke are all equal. No one deserves to be abandoned simply because they belong to a different kind of being. Looking at his grandson, still as stubborn as he was when he was little, but now finally willing to trust someone else, his grandfather understands Jiro is not simply being reckless. He has truly chosen his own path. His grandfather sighs, removes his headband, and declares his surrender. The life-or-death battle suddenly ends with his admission of defeat. It turns out he never intended to kill Jiro until the end. He was testing whether Jiro had enough resolve, enough strength, and the ability to work together with Rago. After the battle, Jiro soaks in the bath, wincing from his wounds while complaining that Rago keeps nagging him. Rago sits on the edge of the tub and tells him not to keep doing reckless things. If Jiro dies, then everything Rago did to save him will have been meaningless. Although he still sounds annoyed, Rago promises that when the situation is truly dangerous, he will lend Jiro his strength. Jiro admits that he does not know where the future will lead them, but now that they are in the same boat, they should at least try to get along. He officially calls Rago his partner, turning their relationship from a rescued cat and the boy who saved him into a duo sharing one life. In another room, Jiro's grandfather, his back covered in bandages, calls Shiba. The section chief says that a car will come to pick Jiro up the next morning. He also admits that when he heard Jiro had escaped the hospital, he actually felt relieved. According to Shiba, anyone accepted by the Secret Service must have the resolve and ability to act independently. Jiro has just proven that by escaping the hospital, defeating the guards, and returning home to face his own grandfather. His grandfather tells Shiba to stop being so noisy and hangs up. After receiving his grandfather's approval and officially accepting Rago as his partner, Jiro begins packing to leave home under orders from the bureau. His traditional room quickly becomes a complete mess, although the only things he truly cares about are several sets of clothes and enough underwear to survive the trip. Sitting on top of the pile, Rago reminds him that neither of them knows what the bureau intends to do with them. This journey may even prevent Jiro from ever returning home. Jiro immediately asks whether the cat is worried about him. Rago becomes flustered, denies everything, and turns his face away. The reaction says more than the answer. Two individuals who once saved each other by accident are now preparing to face an uncertain future together. Ichika is assigned to collect Jiro. She explains that her mission is equal parts escort and surveillance, especially after he demonstrated an impressive talent for escaping custody at the hospital. A secure transport vehicle is already waiting outside. Before leaving, Jiro turns to say goodbye to his grandfather. The old man responds by warning the stupid brat not to die without permission. Jiro fires back that the stubborn old man had better not drop dead while his grandson is away. It sounds deeply disrespectful, but within the Azuma family, this is practically an emotional farewell. His grandfather no longer stands in the way of Jiro's decision. Jiro also understands that the moment he steps into the vehicle, his ordinary life is officially left behind. Inside the sealed cargo compartment, both of Jiro's hands are locked inside a metal restraint designed to suppress Mononoke energy. He looks less like a passenger and more like a prisoner being transferred between facilities. Ichika casually informs him that the comparison is not far from reality. Since merging with Rago, Jiro is no longer an ordinary human in her eyes. He is a creature carrying the power of a Mononoke. To the Bureau, Mononoke are targets to be monitored, contained, or destroyed. Jiro is irritated by the way this girl gives herself the authority to judge everyone around her. Ichika immediately leans closer and declares that the two things she hates most are Mononoke and men who look down on women. She then tells him directly that she refuses to acknowledge his existence. Jiro tries to argue, but the fist hovering inches from his face quickly changes his mind. The employees driving in front hear the commotion and begin wondering whether something very different is happening inside the cargo compartment. Their argument wakes Rago. The moment he appears, he complains that they disturbed his sleep and mocks the bureau for being so understaffed that it sent an inexperienced little girl to handle the escort. Ichika is furious about being insulted by a cat, but before she can respond, an unnatural fog begins forming outside the vehicle. The mountain road is soon completely covered. The driver initially assumes it is ordinary weather, right until an enormous object appears in the middle of the road. The vehicle brakes violently and flips onto its side, throwing Jiro and Ichika across the compartment while the front section is nearly crushed. Realizing something is wrong, Ichika orders Jiro to remain inside and goes out alone. She finds both bureau drivers dead, while two strange Mononoke wait inside the fog. One is thin and wears glasses, while the other possesses an enormous body. They complain that human flesh does not look particularly appetizing and express disappointment that an ambush against a bureau vehicle has produced only one young woman as opposition. Insulting the bureau was already irritating, but dismissing her because she is a woman strikes the exact nerve Ichika hates most. Her patience immediately expires. A device around her wrist lights up and deploys her combat equipment like a transformation sequence. Both enemies release their Mononoke energy. The large one expands into a towering monster, while the one wearing glasses becomes a reptilian humanoid with red eyes and overwhelming speed. Ichika fires first, forcing the giant to protect its face. When it counters with an arm like a massive hammer, she avoids the strike, runs directly up the limb, and repeatedly slashes its body. Her blades leave only shallow wounds. The giant is slow and not especially intelligent, but its body is so durable that ordinary attacks are nearly useless. Ichika decides to change targets, yet the moment she shifts her attention, the reptilian Mononoke disappears and reappears directly behind her. One enemy pressures her from the front with overwhelming power and defense, while the other waits for the perfect blind spot. The ambush was designed from the beginning to trap the escort between them. From inside the wrecked vehicle, Jiro hears the battle and wants to help. Reigo explains that the fog is actually a barrier. Everything within it has been separated from the outside world and transformed into territory controlled by the Mononoke. Jiro does not fully understand the mechanics, but he knows Ichika is fighting alone. He asks Rago to break the restraint. Unfortunately, it was specifically designed to block Mononoke energy, meaning even Rago cannot remove it. The cat advises Jiro to stay out of the conflict. The Bureau has spent years sealing Mononoke and treating them like tools, so Rago sees no reason to interfere in a battle between two groups he dislikes. Jiro rejects that logic immediately. Ichika may hate him, but she is still outside risking her life to protect everyone in the vehicle. He refuses to sit quietly while someone fights and possibly dies because of him. At that moment, the giant Mononoke smashes the cargo compartment apart with a single punch. Jiro and Rago are thrown onto the grass, but the impact also frees them from the enclosed space. Ichika retreats beside them, already injured. Standing atop the wreckage, the reptilian enemy recognizes Jiro immediately. It reveals that their mission is to capture the boy who merged with Rago. If Jiro surrenders, they will take him alive. If he resists, they will eat him on the spot. The fact that the enemy knows both the target and the exact transport route confirms that information has leaked from inside the Bureau. Ichika realizes there must be a traitor, but she has no time to investigate. Jiro asks her to remove the suppression device so he can fight. Ichika still refuses because she cannot accept depending on Mononoke power, even when the alternative is being eaten alive. Ichika remembers herself at 5 years old, standing silently at her parents' funeral while holding a stuffed bear. Both of them were killed by Mononoke during a mission. Members of the family worried that a child could never carry the responsibility of succession, but the clan leader declared that Ichika would inherit the Kishimojin family. Standing before her parents' graves, she cried and promised to study, train, and become an exceptional agent just like them. From that day forward, her hatred of Mononoke and the pressure to complete every mission became the forces keeping her moving. Depending on a Mononoke now feels like betraying both her parents and the promise she made beside their graves. Back in the present, Jiro reminds Ichika that she constantly calls herself a professional willing to do anything necessary to complete a mission. If that is true, then choosing methods based on personal feelings while both of them are about to be eaten makes no sense. His blunt words strike directly at the sense of responsibility Ichika values above everything else. She finally removes the suppression device from Jiro's arms. Rago immediately releases his energy. Darkness coils around Jiro's body. His right eye turns golden, and one arm becomes covered in the power of the Black Star of Calamity. The giant charges forward, intending to crush them both in a single attack. Jiro accelerates directly toward it, avoids the descending fist, and concentrates all of the dark energy into his counterattack. Reigo tells him that the fight must be finished with one strike. Jiro's punch tears through the defense that Ichika's weapons could not penetrate and launches the enormous Mononoke high into the air. The reptilian Mononoke freezes in shock at Jiro's strength. Ichika uses that single moment of distraction. She attacks from behind, filling every escape route with blades before taking down the high-speed opponent. Jiro destroys the defensive wall, while Ichika eliminates the mobile threat. Both enemies fall almost simultaneously. The barrier collapses and the fog surrounding the area disappears. Their victory does not come from Jiro overwhelming everything alone. It happens because Ichika temporarily sets aside her prejudice. Rago lends Jiro his power, and Jiro proves he can use that power to protect others rather than lose control. After the attack, Jiro lands on the grass in a position that is anything but graceful. Rago calmly criticizes his terrible landing technique. Jiro argues that no one has time to think about looking impressive while falling out of the sky. Ichika returns and immediately declares that she will not thank him. Jiro replies that neither of them fought for her gratitude. Sitting on his shoulder, Rago concludes that the situation is even and no one owes anyone anything. The explanation allows Ichika to accept their help without sacrificing her pride. She finally introduces herself properly as Kishimojin Ichika. Jiro immediately starts calling her Ichika, irritating her with his instant familiarity. Even so, the distance between them is already completely different from when they sat opposite each other inside the transport vehicle. While Jiro and Ichika are forced to walk away from the scene because their vehicle has become a pile of twisted metal, Shiba presents a proposal to the Bureau's senior officials. Several members oppose allowing someone fused with a Mononoke to participate in operations. However, Rago has shown no immediate hostility and is actively cooperating with Jiro. Shiba argues that imprisoning the boy will not stop their enemies from hunting him. If Jiro is already bait, then the bait should at least possess a sharp enough hook to defend itself. He carries the blood of a shinobi, has significant combat potential, and will grow stronger through practical training. Shiba offers to accept personal responsibility and proposes creating an experimental 5-person unit specializing in Mononoke threats, the Special Mobile Mononoke Counterintelligence Team, better known as Black Torch. After several days of examinations to confirm that his fused body is stable, Jiro is taken to an isolated warehouse complex beside the sea. Shiba explains that this is the base of Special Operations Division 2. Every department within the bureau maintains a separate facility, often disguised as an office, factory, hospital, library, or shrine. The new base looks so ordinary that Jiro assumes he has been recruited to move cargo. Shiba refers to him as Black Torch, but Jiro could not care less whether the name is Torch, Pouch, or anything else. He has no intention of becoming an obedient bureau subordinate. His only goal is to resolve the consequences of his own actions and regain his freedom. If fighting Mononoke is necessary, he will do it. Shiba does not force him to immediately accept the organization, knowing that conventional arguments rarely work on someone this stubborn. At that moment, a black vehicle enters the warehouse. The first person to step out is Usami, Shiba's assistant. She recognizes Jiro from the report she has heard, although another assignment prevented her from meeting him earlier. Accompanying her is a neatly dressed teenage boy wearing glasses. The moment he leaves the car, he expresses disappointment that his journey with Usami ended so quickly, and insists that a lady should never carry heavy luggage herself. His manners are so polished that Jiro can already sense the presence of a sheltered young noble from across the building. Inside the base, Shiba formally introduces Kirihara Reiji, a 17-year-old recruit recently transferred to Special Operations Division 2. Like Ichika, Reiji is the heir to a prestigious family of bureau agents. The moment she hears this, Ichika assumes he must be a spoiled young master and quietly hopes he will not treat his teammates as servants before dragging the entire group into disaster. Reiji responds that he has heard of the Kishimojin heir for years. He knows she possesses incredible determination and a direct personality, but never expected her to be so charming in person. A single compliment turns Ichika bright red. The same girl who cuts down Mononoke without hesitation is completely immobilized by a few sweet words. The friendly atmosphere disappears the moment Reiji turns toward Jiro. He has read the report and refuses to accept that someone who is half human and half Mononoke has been placed on the same team as him. He even suggests that Jiro should quietly enter a containment facility. Jiro immediately approaches and asks whether Reiji is trying to start a fight. Reiji calmly explains that his personal principle is to remain honest at all times. Jiro calls him an annoying four-eyed snob, while Reiji responds by calling him a monster. Less than 5 minutes after meeting, the two have successfully introduced themselves through open hostility. Ichika and Usami prepare to intervene, but Shiba does the opposite. He orders both recruits to go outside, fight each other, and use their full strength. The match is not merely an opportunity for two new recruits to resolve their immediate dislike. It is directly connected to the conditions required for Black Torch to exist. The Bureau's leadership wants to determine whether Azuma Jiro is genuinely useful and capable of controlling himself. Rago's power could previously only be sealed away. Now, for the first time, a human can actively wield it, creating an opportunity too valuable to ignore. However, if Jiro loses control, then both he and Rago become a living weapon that must be permanently contained. A complete evaluation would normally require an entire month, but the situation has become too urgent. For now, the Bureau will begin by examining combat ability. Usami prepares a camera to record everything. Jiro wraps bandages around both hands and takes the stance of Azuma-style martial arts. Reiji puts on gloves and enters the field carrying a wooden weapon. The gentlemanly expression from earlier disappears. On one side stands the host of the Black Star of Calamity, a boy only beginning to enter the secret world of the Bureau. On the other stands the carefully trained heir to the Kirihara family. The battle that will determine whether Jiro deserves a place in Black Torch officially begins. Immediately after joining the experimental Black Torch unit, Jiro and Reiji are dragged straight to the training ground by Shiba for an evaluation. Rago lies lazily across Jiro's shoulder, showing very little enthusiasm for watching two young men settle their differences with their fists. Shiba explains that the Kirihara family has been famous for swordsmanship since the era of the Oniwaban. Its techniques have been passed down through generations for use in real combat, making a wooden sword the best way for Reiji to demonstrate his specialty. Reiji tells Jiro to use the secret weapon he recently acquired, clearly referring to Rago. Jiro immediately rejects the suggestion. He declares that Rago is not a tool and that no one else needs to interfere in this fight. The answer causes the Black Cat to fall silent for a moment before withdrawing his demonic energy and remaining on Jiro's shoulder as an unwilling spectator. The test will therefore measure only the abilities of the two fighters. Jiro wants to prove that he can still fight independently while making it clear that he considers Rago a partner rather than a weapon. Reiji turns his back on his opponent. calmly permits Jiro to attack whenever he wishes and announces that turning around once will be enough to end the match. The dismissive attitude strikes directly at Jiro's pride. He lowers his center of gravity and charges, then leaps from the ground just before reaching his opponent. Some observers assume Jiro is trying to conceal the sound of his footsteps, although Shiba suspects he may not have planned that far ahead. Even though Jiro approaches through the air, Reiji precisely detects the instant he enters striking range. He turns and swings the wooden sword in a single movement. The blow catches Jiro in midair and sends him crashing onto the training field. Jiro begins bleeding, while Reiji has barely moved from his original position. The difference in experience becomes obvious immediately. Shiba explains that a swordsman who depends only on sight or sound to measure distance is still inexperienced. Reiji maintains a defensive territory around himself, and the moment an enemy enters it, he will detect them. Jiro removed the sound of his footsteps but still failed to overcome that absolute range. Reiji believes the match has already provided enough information to determine the result. Jiro, however, pushes himself back onto his feet. Years of training under his grandfather gave him greater endurance than an ordinary person, and one sword strike is not enough to make him stop. Jiro continues provoking Reiji's swordsmanship. The Kirihara heir removes his glasses and adopts a serious stance. Kirihara sword techniques were not created for demonstrations. They were forged on actual battlefields. Jiro charges directly from the front for the second time, but his earlier defeat gave him the information he needed. He remembers Reiji's exact range and the trajectory of his swing. Waiting until the wooden blade passes through the expected point, Jiro focuses all his strength into a single section of the sword. The opposing forces collide and shatter it. Reiji's glasses fly from his face, and his greatest advantage disappears. Jiro immediately closes the distance and lands a hit, although he also receives another strike during the collision. Both fighters are thrown in opposite directions. This is not an overwhelming victory for Jiro. It proves that he can observe an enemy and dismantle their advantage during the battle itself. Jiro picks up the broken section of the sword and declares that each of them has landed one hit. Since Reiji has also lost his weapon, the current result should be considered a draw. He even offers Reiji a can of soda if he agrees to surrender. Reiji says the provocation sounds like something from a middle school student, but he then removes his glasses completely and charges into a fist fight. The evaluation turns into a brawl fueled entirely by wounded pride. Ichika watches the two idiots punching each other with complete frustration. Usami enthusiastically records every moment as though preserving the beauty of their youth, while Shiba develops a headache trying to imagine how he will convince his superiors that this is a serious special unit. Jiro and Reiji eventually punch each other in the face at the same time and continue fighting until both collapse unconscious in the middle of the field. After waking up, Jiro temporarily considers the result a draw. Reiji objects because he regained consciousness later and therefore considers himself the loser. Jiro does not judge the match based on who woke up first. He admits that if Reiji had been holding a real sword, the opening strike would have killed him. His method of breaking the blade during the second attack also succeeded only because the weapon was made of wood. Under actual combat conditions, Reiji was the true winner. Jiro offers him the promised can of soda as acknowledgement. Just when it appears that the two have finally learned to behave like adults, Jiro grins and reveals that he violently shook the can while Reiji was unconscious. Reiji notices immediately, points the opening toward the person who set the trap, and pulls the tab. Soda sprays directly into Jiro's face. The test ends without an official judgment, but Jiro has shown that he can learn from failure, while Reiji can no longer dismiss him as completely useless. After the match, Usami removes the device containing the recorded footage and asks whether Shiba genuinely intends to submit it to their superiors. The section chief explains that the video is only preliminary evidence. For Black Torch to receive official recognition, they must prove their value during an actual field operation. Since Special Operations Division 2 has not yet been assigned a mission, Shiba decides to select a case independently. With luck, the investigation may also lead them toward whoever is responsible for the recent incidents. The following morning, Jiro, Reiji, and Ichika receive standard Intelligence Bureau combat uniforms. Shiba instructs them to press the control panel on the left wrist. The armor immediately transforms into ordinary clothing through quantum camouflage mode. Tapping it twice causes the wearer's body to become invisible. Teammates can still see a faint outline of one another, while outsiders cannot detect them at all. Jiro excitedly tests the feature in front of Usami, but Shiba quickly reminds him that the camouflage cannot be activated carelessly. Using it significantly reduces the uniform's basic performance, forcing the wearer to choose according to the situation. Reiji immediately understands the trade-off, while Jiro remains fascinated by the equipment. Once preparations are complete, Shiba leads the three to a shrine surrounded by a peaceful landscape. The area looks nothing like the site of their first mission. The group even stops to pray, making Jiro wonder whether they have come to remove bad luck. Reiji observes the route Shiba is taking and predicts that the shrine is merely a disguise for outsiders. A secret intelligence bureau facility must be hidden inside. His deduction is confirmed when Shiba leads everyone toward an office building behind the main shrine. The resident Intelligence Bureau agent appears visibly uncomfortable with their unexpected visit. He warns them that members of Special Operations Division 1 are also on their way, and if both groups meet, the situation may become complicated. Ichika explains that the Intelligence Bureau is composed of several families and political factions. Among them, Special Operations Division 1 possesses some of the greatest manpower and authority, making it almost the complete opposite of Shiba's overlooked Division 2. The groups are not officially enemies, but the administrator grants them only 15 minutes to investigate. Shiba immediately leads everyone into an old storage room and enters a code into a control panel. A hidden passage opens beneath one of the storage racks. The staircase descends into a damp corridor filled with the smell of mold. In sharp contrast to the peaceful shrine above, the pleasant exterior is merely a cover for a prison designed to hold Mononoke. At the end of the corridor stands a gigantic metal door protected by multiple layers of seals. Shiba identifies the location as Special Sealed Mausoleum Number 7, the facility that once imprisoned Rago, and the place where the current chain of incidents began. Beyond the door lies an enormous underground cavern. A massive killing stone rises from the center, surrounded by ropes and countless talismans. This mineral can suppress demonic energy, and Facility 7 is the largest prison of its kind. Rago silently stares at the place where he was once confined. Jiro notices that returning here is clearly painful for his partner. Shiba divides the investigation into two groups. He and Ichika will return to the office to examine records and surveillance data, while Reiji remains with Jiro to question Rago about the day the seal was broken. Reiji immediately requests a change because he wants to accompany Ichika. Shiba calmly walks away as though he heard nothing, leaving three stubborn individuals standing before the killing stone. Jiro asks why Rago was imprisoned here, but the Black Cat admits that he remembers neither the reason nor the events that occurred beforehand. Jiro initially believes he is avoiding the subject. Reiji confirms that the memory loss may be the result of remaining sealed for too long. He once encountered a Mononoke imprisoned so completely that it forgot its own identity. Sealing is a technique that forcibly traps a Mononoke inside a vessel. Unlike possessing a living body, confinement inside an inanimate object leaves its consciousness imprisoned in darkness. The Mononoke's own demonic energy is then used to maintain the prison. The killing stone continues draining its power throughout the entire period of captivity. If the process lasts for decades or centuries, even a powerful Mononoke may not remain intact. In Rago's case, losing only his memories could be considered a relatively mild consequence. The explanation leaves him unusually silent. He was trapped in darkness, unable to move, while time slowly wore away his consciousness. The investigation shifts toward what happened after his release. At the same time, Shiba and Ichika examine the shrine's surveillance system. Every camera across the property became distorted for approximately 10 minutes, yet the electrical system recorded no abnormality. The agent on duty heard only a loud noise and rushed toward the mausoleum. By the time the door was opened, the sealed area was already empty. Ichika concludes that a barrier concealed or isolated the activity occurring inside. This allowed the intruders to destroy the seal without being discovered in time. The footage does not reveal the culprit's face, but it confirms that the enemy possesses enough power to bypass the Intelligence Bureau's defenses. Inside the mausoleum, Rago begins assembling several scattered memories. Cold stone beneath his body, the smell of moisture, dim light, and an overwhelming concentration of demonic energy. When Rago opened his eyes, several Mononoke were standing in the darkness. A glowing screen appeared in front of them, displaying a mysterious man who greeted Rago as though they had known each other for a very long time. He called him the Black Calamity Star that devoured the sun and asked to borrow his power. The man declared that the human world had changed. His faction intended to restore the dignity of the Mononoke and make both humanity and the Intelligence Bureau fear them once again. Their hatred was directed toward both humans and the Bureau. Rago immediately refused the offer. The screen then went dark, and he took advantage of the confusion to escape. His memory ends there. Rago does not recognize the man on the screen or any of the Mononoke present. They broke his seal specifically to recruit the power of the Black Calamity Star. Reiji calmly organizes the information into 3 clues. First, the enemy possesses a method capable of breaking one of the Bureau's strongest seals. Second, their leader knew Rago before his imprisonment, even though Rago himself has lost most of his memories. Third, the group holds an intense hatred toward humanity and the Intelligence Bureau. Together, these facts suggest an organization that has been preparing for a very long time. Jiro believes the quickest solution is to draw them out, beat them until they cannot escape, and force them to reveal everything. Reiji immediately objects because they do not even know the enemy's identity. Acting blindly will only allow the organization to keep controlling the situation. Rago agrees with Jiro that attacking first and asking questions afterward sounds much simpler. Jiro and Rago quickly reach complete agreement, leaving Reiji with a headache. Jiro wants to drag the enemy into the open, while Reiji insists that acting without information will only make them easier to manipulate. Before the argument can reach any conclusion, a hooded figure with white hair calmly walks through the security corridor as though taking an afternoon stroll. He suddenly appears between Jiro and Reiji, placing a hand on each of their shoulders before either detects him, and announces that he came to meet Rago. Jiro and Reiji immediately separate from the intruder. The stranger reveals white hair, sharp teeth, and demonic energy that clearly does not belong to a human. Rago warns Jiro to remain cautious. Reiji understands that this visitor is an extremely important living clue, but still orders everyone to prepare for combat. Both rookies activate the devices on their wrists and transform their uniforms back into combat mode. Jiro dislikes receiving orders from Reiji, yet he still stands beside the man he fought into unconsciousness only the previous day. In front of a genuine enemy, personal arguments have to wait. The white-haired Mononoke shows no sign of concern. He merely smiles and says the situation is convenient because he also wants to test something unfamiliar. Black demonic energy begins spreading throughout the sealed area. Outside, Shiba and Ichika return and discover that the entrance has been completely covered by a black-purple barrier. It is too powerful for either of them to penetrate. Jiro, Reiji, and Rago are now completely isolated inside with the intruder, while their superiors can only search for a way through. At the height of the crisis, a blonde woman with a red marking extending along her left eye arrives beside an older man. She is Kusumi Toko, the commander of Special Operations Division 1. Shiba is surprised that she came personally. Black Torch's first mission has already transformed into a full-scale emergency. Inside the mausoleum, Jiro clenches his fist while Reiji maintains a ready stance. The two rookies, who only recently acknowledged one another's abilities, must now fight on the same side. Their earlier practice match has at least given them some understanding of how the other reacts in combat. Outside, Shiba, Ichika, and the members of Special Operations Division 1 remain blocked by a barrier whose creator is still unknown. The identity of the white-haired Mononoke and his connection to the man who appeared on the screen remain unresolved. The white-haired Mononoke declares that his goal is to become the strongest of his kind, which is why he intends to claim Rago as his source of power. Jiro and Reiji look at his excessive confidence and remark that he sounds like a spoiled child demanding a toy. The white-haired Mononoke explains that his kind is not as fragile as humanity. A Mononoke will not truly die unless its body is completely destroyed, although its demonic energy will eventually disappear without a source to sustain it. Rago, however, is like an endless generator of demonic power. If the stranger can possess that strength, he will never have to fear anyone again. He dismisses Jiro as a temporary container and promises to free Rago from the fool carrying him, after which the two of them will become invincible. Rago coldly replies that he is nobody's property and has no interest in becoming king. Anyone who wants a throne can claim it for themselves. The rejection is so casual that it makes the white-haired Mononoke furious. He charges forward, knocks Jiro and Reiji aside, and seizes Rago in one hand. Even while lying on the ground, Jiro refuses to listen to the stranger's speech. He deliberately draws the enemy's attention and signals Reiji to move. The Kirihara swordsman has already been preparing his attack. He instantly releases a long-range slash that crosses the battlefield and opens a deep wound along the white-haired Mononoke's body. Jiro quickly catches Rago as he returns, but an attack powerful enough to split an ordinary Mononoke only makes this opponent bleed. He remains standing and shows no sign of losing the ability to fight. Reiji realizes that the enemy is far more dangerous than expected. Shiba will eventually notice the abnormal barrier, but until reinforcements arrive, the three of them must survive on their own. Rago tells Jiro to trust him and Reiji, only for Jiro to answer by telling him to be quiet. The white-haired Mononoke begins repeating the same words from across the battlefield. He hates humans because they depend on numbers and then act as though they rule the world. Black and red liquid gathers around his hand and expands into an enormous weapon. He declares that the game is over. Reiji will die first, while Jiro will be kept alive as a more suitable vessel for Rago. After that, he will teach them exactly who is the master and who is the servant. Outside the temple, Kusumi Toko and the members of Special Operations Division 1 arrive at the black barrier covering the entrance. Tokita, an elderly intelligence agent specializing in barriers, takes responsibility for dismantling it. He explains that the structure is extremely stable and will require time to break. Ichika immediately asks how she can help, so Tokita gives her several stakes and instructs her to drive them into specific locations. The other agents are relieved because with Tokita present, the barrier should disappear within approximately 5 minutes. Kusumi Toko looks towards Shiba and asks whether he expected Black Torch's first mission to go wrong and deliberately brought Division 1 as an emergency measure. Shiba admits that the people trapped inside are subordinates he deeply values. He trusts them to endure the situation, but he also trusts Toko and Tokieta to create an escape route if the danger exceeds what the new recruits can handle. Their conversation sounds like another exchange of insults, but neither of them slows down while 3 people remain isolated inside. Within the barrier, the white-haired Mononoke swings his enormous weapon across the battlefield. Every impact cracks the stone floor and throws dust into the air. Reiji blocks directly with his sword, but the weapon is too heavy. He is forced backward and struck hard enough to draw blood. Jiro immediately releases Reigo's power. His right eye turns golden as he attacks from behind, but the enemy reacts with incredible speed, turns, blocks the strike with his weapon, and knocks Jiro away. Jiro continues pressing forward and drives a fist covered in demonic energy toward the Mononoke's face. The white-haired enemy counters first, sending him flying across the chamber and crashing into the stone floor. As the dust settles, Reiji desperately calls his teammate's name. Rago appears in the center of the battlefield, with the mark linking him to Jiro clearly visible across his body. The white-haired Mononoke mocks Jiro for accomplishing so little despite carrying the power of the Black Calamity Star. He then looks at Reigo with false sympathy and claims that the legendary cat chose the wrong vessel. Jiro remains motionless after the attack, and Black Torch's first mission has already become a desperate struggle. The enemy says it is a waste for Reigo's strength to remain trapped inside a human body, and promises that he will eventually tear the Black Calamity Star free. Jiro immediately tells him to shut up. He cannot tolerate the way this creature divides everyone into useful and worthless categories. To Jiro, human and Mononoke are merely labels placed upon people by others. He and Reigo will decide for themselves who they are. Reigo still insults Jiro as an immature child, but ultimately admits that he is right. The white-haired Mononoke becomes enraged and releases dark energy throughout the underground chamber. Dense black streams attack from several directions. Jiro channels Reigo's power into his right eye, gathers demonic energy around his arm, and charges directly into the assault. Reiji follows with the Kirihara sword style. They require no discussion to move in perfect rhythm. Jiro breaks the attack from the front while Reiji cuts through the opening he creates. Their combined strike tears apart the stone floor and forces the enemy backward through the smoke. Blood covers his clothing, yet he smiles as though the battle has finally delivered exactly what he wanted. He reaches out and demands that Jiro surrender Reigo. However, the barrier outside has already been broken, meaning reinforcements could enter at any moment. Continuing the battle would only bring an entire intelligence division into the fight, so the white-haired Mononoke chooses to retreat. Before disappearing, he explains that he is sparing Jiro because killing him would destroy his opportunity to obtain Rago. He promises that next time, he will take Jiro's hands, tongue, and eyes as trophies. Jiro asks for his name and introduces himself as Azuma Jiro. The surname causes the stranger to stop. He recognizes Jiro as a member of the Azuma intelligence family and calls him that man's son. With one more mystery left behind, he dissolves into the darkness. Jiro has no idea whom the enemy meant. As far as he is concerned, his grandfather and the animals who raised him have always been his family. The history of the Azuma clan remains an empty space without an answer. Outside the temple, the members of Special Operations Division 1 prepare to return to headquarters and submit their report. The mission was never officially authorized, 2 agents were injured, and the sealing facility was damaged. The consequences are already accumulating. Toko reminds Shiba that he will be held responsible for everything that happened. The leader of Division 2 is prepared to accept any punishment, but he still considers the survival of 2 inexperienced agents against such a powerful Mononoke an achievement worth recognizing. As everyone rests beneath the trees, Reiji looks at the uniform that protected him and admits that without its defensive properties, he might not still be alive. Ichika blames herself for being unable to break the barrier and provide support. Jiro remains silent while thinking about the enemy's words. Shiba tells them not to focus only on what they failed to accomplish. Feelings of helplessness and confusion are experiences they must endure if they truly want to grow. Jiro finally rises. Instead of continuing to wonder whom the enemy was referring to, he decides to search for the answer himself. He announces that he will become an intelligence agent and join Black Torch. Shiba reminds him that he has technically been a member since accepting the mission. Only now has Jiro truly accepted that role. Jiro, Reiji, and Ichika must work as a team toward the same objective. They do not need to think alike, and each may carry different emotions. What matters is turning those feelings into strength. Shiba promises that he will always support them from behind. Although with this particular team, standing behind them may also mean standing dangerously close to the next explosion. Back at the harbor base, Usami announces that their superiors have many things to say about the unauthorized operation. Before the written reports can multiply any further, however, Black Torch receives a new assignment. Officially, it is called an exercise. In reality, it is training. Shiba has also prepared a special assistant. Before he can finish speaking, a blue-haired girl drops from above and lands directly on his shoulders. Her sudden entrance makes the team believe the base is under attack, while Shiba remains perfectly still as though he has grown accustomed to serving as free transportation. The girl is introduced as Fuyo, a Mononoke cooperating with the Intelligence Bureau. Shiba explains that the organization normally eliminates dangerous Mononoke, but it is willing to cooperate with individuals who are friendly toward humans. Fuyo immediately declares that she is not submitted to anyone. The moment she notices Rago, she calls the black cat rather cute. The pride of the Black Calamity Star immediately suffers a direct hit. Rago calls her an arrogant little runt, while Fuyo responds by calling him a stray cat. The two Mononoke have barely met and are already preparing for an argument. The training has not even begun, yet the instructors are in danger of fighting each other. Once everyone is in position, Shiba begins Black Torch's training against demonic techniques. Certain Mononoke can hypnotize targets and create illusions, making it dangerously easy for agents to attack their own teammates in the field. Fuyo will provide the necessary experience. The blue-haired Mononoke demands that the recruits appreciate her contribution, then activates the frenzied lotus formation. Pink petals fill the air as enormous lotus buds rise around Jiro, Reiji, and Ichika. The flowers close and swallow all three into separate spaces. Usami worries that Shiba never explained the technique to them, but the division leader believes training is more effective when it feels real. Reiji awakens on an endless surface of water surrounded by only a few lotus flowers. He quickly realizes that the demonic technique has imprisoned him inside a barrier and that his only objective is to escape. The environment suddenly transforms into a dark cavern. Reiji's deceased white-haired brother approaches with a sword, calls his name, and asks how much stronger he has become. Reiji draws his blade and attacks, but his brother blocks effortlessly and mocks him for still lacking enough skill to defeat him. The frenzied lotus formation does not create random monsters. It brings forth the person Reiji finds most difficult to overcome and turns him into an examiner. Inside Ichika's barrier, the scene is not a battlefield but the garden of her childhood. She sees her younger self watering flowers beside her mother. Her mother explains that she must water not only the petals but also the roots beneath them, then asks whether Ichika wants to grow flowers when she becomes older. The young girl immediately shakes her head. She wants to become an intelligence agent like her parents, fight for justice, and defeat evil. Her mother warns that it is a frightening profession, but Ichika believes she can succeed because she is their daughter. A servant soon arrives and announces that her mother must leave for an urgent mission. The woman gently pats her daughter's head, tells her to wait at home, and walks away. It is the last time Ichika sees her mother. What follows are the wake, the funeral, and an emptiness that takes a child years to accept. From that day onward, Ichika devotes herself completely to training and becoming an intelligence agent. She believes that the closer she comes to the image of her late mother, the less pain she will feel. Shortly after Ichika officially joins the bureau, her family's former servant appears and says that his master sent him to collect the young lady. She is taken into a secret research facility. At the center of the freezing room stands an enormous glass chamber. Inside is the mother Ichika always believed had died, her entire body petrified in a position of terrible pain. The servant confirms that this is the real lady of the household. A recorded message from Ichika's father begins playing. He admits that he remained silent for 10 years because regulations prohibited revealing the incident to anyone outside the organization. Her mother never died. A demonic technique turned her to stone during a mission, while the Mononoke responsible remains free. The bureau and the family spent 10 years attempting to remove the curse without success. Her father can only ask forgiveness for his powerlessness. Ichika does not collapse. She places a hand against the glass and declares that from this moment onward, her thoughts and actions will belong entirely to her. She promises to restore her mother and asks her to wait just a little longer. The frenzied lotus formation does not allow Ichika to awaken. An illusion speaking in her mother's voice suddenly emerges from the petrified figure. It orders Ichika to remain obediently at home, just as she did in the past. It reminds her that intelligence work is terrifying, and warns that continuing down this path will eventually give her the same fate as her mother. Words originally spoken from love are twisted by the technique into chains restraining Ichika's will. Cracks spread across the stone body, darkness covers her mother's face, and purple eyes open inside the surrounding demonic energy. The entire figure transforms into an enormous monster and charges toward Ichika. A warm childhood memory becomes a nightmare, and the enemy she must confront wears the form of the person she wants most desperately to save. In another space, Jiro and Rago run endlessly across the surface of the water without finding a wall or an exit. Jiro becomes increasingly irritated by a barrier that feels like an enormous open-world map without a single direction marker. An immense mass of darkness suddenly appears in their path. The creature opens its mouth to reveal rows of pale teeth. Rago confirms that they are still trapped inside Fuyo's technique, but the monster before them feels deeply familiar. It resembles something hidden within the memories damaged by his ancient seal. Jiro has no time to solve the mystery. He tightens his fist and tells Rago that they will fight together. The vessel of the Black Calamity Star immediately takes his stance. Following the Azuma family approach, if they cannot find an exit, they will defeat whatever is blocking the way. The episode ends just before the two sides finally collide. Reiji is pulled back into the years when he still lived under the Kirihara roof with his twin brother Shinji. On the training grounds, Shinji was always one step ahead of him. Yet despite their father clearly favoring Shinji, the older twin never treated Reiji like a useless shadow. After one sparring session, Shinji even brought medicine to check on him and insisted that having Reiji beside him was precisely what allowed him to keep improving. Reiji, however, saw things completely differently at the time. Shinji was the family heir and would eventually inherit the Kirihara name, so Reiji believed that simply becoming becoming a stepping stone for his brother would be enough. Shinji immediately rejected that idea. Even if he became head of the family one day, the two of them would always remain brothers. Shinji then asked Reiji for one favor. If he ever lost his way or stumbled in the future, Reiji should help him. The brothers bumped fists like a promise, and Shinji's words, "I'm counting on you," became a memory Reiji could never forget. Not long afterward, the Kirihara family prepared for the sword rite, a ceremony that served both as graduation from the school and as a test to confirm the next legitimate successor. Inside a cave behind the estate rested the demon sword Yamakaze, a weapon the Kirihara family had guarded for generations. A mononoke was sealed within the blade, and its resentment and demonic energy had grown increasingly concentrated over time. Shinji's task was to enter the cave, subdue Yamakaze, and bring it back out. Both brothers had sensed its terrifying presence since childhood, so Reiji could only warn Shinji not to let the sword devour his consciousness. Shinji smiled confidently and entered the cave. After some time, his silhouette finally appeared again, but everything had changed. Shinji's hair had turned white, Yamakaze was covered in black and red demonic energy, and every guard near the cave entrance had been knocked down. Their father immediately drew his sword to block Shinji's path and shouted at Reiji to run because, at his current level, he had absolutely no chance of fighting his brother. In that moment, Reiji understood that the person he had spent his entire life looking up to had been swallowed by Yamakaze. What haunted Reiji even more were the cold words Shinji left behind. He did not kill his brother. Instead, he told Reiji to become stronger, desperately, recklessly stronger, and then one day, come find him and kill him with his own hands. The words were cruel, yet tears were running down Shinji's face. Reiji could not understand how much of his brother's consciousness remained at that moment, nor why the man who once promised they would always be brothers chose to turn his back and leave. All Reiji could do was remain behind and call Shinji's name in helplessness. The frenzied lotus formation pulls Reiji back into the present. The white-haired Shinji created from his memories is still standing before him, and their swords continue clashing across the surface of the water. Reiji quickly realizes that strength is not the real problem. The person in front of him was created entirely from what Reiji himself already knows. No matter how many times he defeats or questions the illusion, it can never reveal Shinji's true motives. If Reiji wants an answer, he must keep moving forward and find the real Shinji himself. When the illusion attacks again, Reiji remembers their fist bump and the words, "I'm counting on you." He catches the arm holding the sword. This time he is no longer fighting to force an answer out of the past. He has decided to use his own strength to reach the truth in the real world. The moment his resolve changes, Shinji's figure shatters into black fragments and disappears. Reiji admits that this is the first time he has ever been trapped inside an illusion this realistic, but it also finally showed him which direction he needs to follow. Inside another barrier, Ichika is still being pursued by a shadow monster born from memories of her mother. Between its attacks, the image of her gentle mother repeatedly appears, almost as though trying to pull Ichika back into the helplessness of childhood. Seeing the person she most desperately wants to save still hurts, but Ichika no longer allows that pain to control her. She avoids each attack, closes the distance, softly apologizes, and cuts straight through the illusion. She then calmly declares that something like this can no longer shake her because she is not a child who can only stand still and wait anymore. Ichika's lotus opens and returns her to the training grounds. Reiji escaped before her and is already standing beside Shiba and the others observing the exercise. Both of them completed the challenge surprisingly quickly. One lotus bud, however, still refuses to open. Jiro and Rago remain trapped inside, and Fuyo soon realizes that the situation has already gone beyond the limits of an ordinary training exercise. The frenzied lotus formation normally exploits a target's anxieties and unresolved memories to create illusions. Jiro is an unprecedented case. Two souls now coexist inside one merged body, one human, and the other the legendary Black Calamity star that remained sealed for hundreds of years. Inside the formation, Jiro and Rago confront an enormous mass of darkness, with white eyes and a huge mouth filled with teeth. Jiro charges and attacks, but his strikes accomplish almost nothing. When he demands to know what the creature actually is, it replies that if he wants to know, then it will show him. Darkness immediately crashes down and swallows both of them. At the same time, the lotus outside begins deforming. Fuyo panics and confirms that the frenzied lotus formation has gone out of control. The technique itself is reacting abnormally to Jiro and Rago's unique condition, and even Fuyo can no longer dispel it voluntarily. Shiba suspects that Rago is most likely the cause, but before anyone can intervene, Jiro and his partner are dragged even deeper into another layer of memory. When Jiro opens his eyes, he sees the familiar killing stone. The scenery then changes into a shrine beneath the daylight. A young villager appears, bows respectfully to Rago, and thanks him because the crops have been good, the land tax was paid without trouble, and his mother's illness has improved. Jiro can only stare in disbelief. Apparently, the black cat who spends his days complaining from Jiro's shoulder was once worshipped like a god. Rago immediately denies ever blessing crops or curing anyone. He only happened to like the area and chose to stay there. However, the presence of the Black Calamity star was was enough to keep dangerous Mononoke away. While surrounding villages continued suffering attacks, this settlement remained peaceful, so its people naturally believed Rago was silently protecting them. Every day, they brought offerings of radishes and dried fish. Rago complained constantly, yet continued lounging around the shrine, never calling himself a god and never driving the villagers away. Jiro gradually realizes that this is not some random illusion. Rago also begins remembering. These are genuine memories from before he was sealed inside the Killing Stone. The time is the 15th year of Kyoho, during the rule of the 8th Tokugawa shogun, Yoshimune. In that era, some Mononoke were feared as monsters, while others were respected and worshipped by humans as mountain gods or local guardian deities. The memory continues into an afternoon when a white-haired Mononoke named Amagi appears before the shrine. The moment present-day Rago hears his voice, he feels an immediate sense of familiarity. The image of the figure who appeared on the screen after Rago's seal was broken suddenly returns to his mind. Rago finally confirms that the person he saw back then was Amagi, meaning the mysterious enemy in the present already knew him during the Edo period. Amagi explains that humans have begun organizing their hunts against Mononoke with increasing efficiency. The shogunate has secretly assembled a specialized force known as the Oniwaban to deal with them. These hunters operate in coordinated groups, and there are even rumors that some Mononoke have been domesticated and now help humans hunt their own kind. Amagi believes the balance between the two races is collapsing. Several of his companions have already been killed, so he has traveled from place to place gathering allies to resist the Oniwaban. A group of cloaked Mononoke stands behind Amagi. He wants Rago to join them because the strength of the Black Calamity Star could completely change the balance of power. Rago refuses immediately. He is not defending humans, nor does he particularly care about the Oniwaban. He simply dislikes the idea of gathering into a group and relying on other people's strength to solve personal problems. In Rago's mind at the time, everyone should handle their own affairs, and he has no intention of choosing either side. Amagi and his followers refuse to accept that answer. They demand to know whether Rago intends to side with humanity. They even argue that regardless of which side he chooses, they cannot simply ignore a Mononoke as powerful as him. Rago still refuses to let anyone force him into making a choice. At the time, he also does not yet understand the Oniwaban clearly, or realize how far Amagi is prepared to go. Sometime later, Amagi truly returns, but this time there is no conversation. He and his followers have traveled through villages, devouring humans to build strength for the coming conflict. The peaceful land surrounding Rago's shrine is transformed into a battlefield. Even the villagers who once brought him dried fish and radishes are caught in the disaster. At that point, the Black Calamity Star can no longer remain uninvolved. Rago releases his full power. His small feline body transforms into a gigantic mass of darkness with white eyes and enormous teeth, the exact form Jiro encountered earlier inside the frenzied lotus formation. Rago's strength completely overwhelms Amagi's faction, but the battle also devastates the surrounding region. Even after being critically wounded, Amagi remains conscious enough to force Rago to confront the one thing he least wants to see. The villagers were murdered by Amagi's side, while the Mononoke who followed Amagi were swept away by Rago's attacks. In the end, nothing remains except ruined land. Amagi continues forcing Rago to choose. If Rago kills him here, the Oniwaban will eventually come after the Black Calamity Star as well. If he does not want to become their target, then he should side with the Mononoke and destroy the Oniwaban first. Amagi repeatedly demands an answer, but the more he is pressured to choose, the more irritated Rago becomes. Memories of the villagers who treated his presence as protection fill his mind. One side wanted to turn him into a god. The other wanted to turn him into a weapon. In the end, Rago chooses a path no one expects. He does not kill Amagi. He does not join the Mononoke faction. He does not actively side with the Oniwaban either. Instead, Rago enters the Killing Stone himself and seals his own body away. He calls it a decision to belong to neither side, then disappears into a sleep that lasts for hundreds of years. The memory ends, and Jiro and Rago return to the water-covered space inside the frenzied lotus formation. Jiro shows absolutely no mercy and says that calling Rago's choice neutrality may sound impressive, but it was basically running away. Rago immediately explodes in anger. Jiro, however, has no intention of judging his past in simple terms of right and wrong. What matters to him is that the Rago of the present is different. When Jiro was about to die, Rago willingly used his own life and power to save him, and the two of them have been fighting side by side ever since. Jiro argues that dividing everything into humans, Mononoke, allies, and enemies only makes the situation more complicated. He has never asked Rago to side with humanity. The important thing is that the Rago of the present chose to walk beside him. Rago stubbornly refuses to admit anything aloud, but even he recognizes the contradiction. A creature that once tried desperately to belong to no faction is now sitting on a human's shoulder and willingly lending that human his power. The enormous shadow appears once again. This time, Jiro understands that it is not another Mononoke. It is the part of Rago's past that still clings to him, constantly whispering that remaining alone means never having to choose a side and never suffering another loss. It even wants Jiro to disappear so Rago can return to the isolation he once chose. But the Rago of the present is no longer exactly the same cat who sealed himself inside the Killing Stone. Jiro stands beside Rago instead of facing him. He says he has no intention of dying together with him inside this place. Rago finally stops hesitating. The two partners charge toward the shadow of the past together. The frenzied lotus formation shakes violently. Outside, the lotus erupts with demonic energy and begins cracking apart. Shiba has to catch Fuyo when she nearly collapses from exhaustion. Jiro returns to reality bent over and gasping for breath, while Rago remains seated on his shoulder exactly as usual. Together, they have broken free from something even Fuyo could no longer control. Ichika and Reiji are waiting nearby. The final training exercise is over, but its greatest value was not simply teaching the team to resist illusion techniques. The frenzied lotus formation accidentally recovered a fragment of Rago's missing memories. The name Amagi has finally been confirmed, and the acquaintance from the Edo period is also the same person who appeared on the screen when Rago's seal was broken. The missing connection between past and present has finally been restored. Shiba immediately realizes how important this information is. A training session meant to build resistance against Mononoke techniques has unexpectedly uncovered a card that Special Operations Division 2 never possessed before. Ichika suggests writing a report and sending it to their superiors, but Shiba is in no hurry. After finally obtaining a trump card this valuable, he intends to make sure they use it properly. The Black Torch team has barely sat down for a meal after training when the television delivers their next mission straight to the dinner table. Over the past month, a series of unexplained deaths has been reported, with many victims found missing everything below the head. At this point, even the most creative police report would struggle to call that a traffic accident. Reiji immediately suspects Mononoke involvement, and Fuyo agrees that the possibility is extremely high. Watching her casually enjoy human food, Jiro asks why Mononoke would bother eating people in the first place. Fuyo explains that what they truly crave is not necessarily flesh, but human life force, an energy source capable of directly strengthening their demonic power. That immediately reminds Reiji of what Amagi said in Rago's recovered memories. If the Mononoke appearing recently are all trying to increase their strength, these deaths may not be random hunting incidents at all, but part of an organized effort to gather resources. Meanwhile, the town of Hirosaka is suddenly swallowed by an unnaturally dense fog, and every road leading into the area is immediately sealed off. Elsewhere, Shiba brings the name Amagi to Kusumi Toko, the head of Special Operations Division 1, who is already buried under work. Shiba is considerate enough to deliver the important clue first before casually asking her to overlook the little incident where he went rogue at the shrine. And while he's already pushing his luck, he also asks permission for Black Torch to participate in the serial murder investigation. Toko rejects him immediately. Unfortunately for her, once Shiba starts negotiating, he clearly has no intention of leaving quietly. He argues that his rookies have completed their training, survived real combat, and produced actual results. If they still are not worth using after all that, then she might as well fire him along with them. The poor man is practically putting his own job on the table for these kids. Before the argument can go any further, Tokieda calls with an emergency report from Hirosaka. Toko leaves at once, and Shiba immediately follows. Outside Hirosaka, police have blocked every road into town. Helicopters circle overhead, but from above all they can see is a solid ocean of white fog. The media is publicly treating the situation as a possible chemical terrorist attack, while the Bureau takes one look and realizes that the entire town has been sealed inside a massive barrier. Jiro only now notices that most of the suited men wearing earpieces around the scene are Bureau personnel. Shiba explains that Mononoke activity has been relatively quiet for the past several decades, so the number of agents specialized in handling large-scale supernatural incidents has steadily declined. Most personnel are now more accustomed to fighting humans than monsters. That means when something truly serious happens, even an experimental unit like Black Torch gets pushed onto the front line. He gives them a quick summary. Numerous civilians are trapped inside, along with at least one dangerous group of Mononoke. Their mission is to rescue the civilians, destroy the barrier, and neutralize the enemy. Capturing them alive would be preferable. Shiba especially emphasizes the prisoner part because he suspects the Mononoke inside Hirosaka are only underlings. Someone more important may be supporting them from behind the scenes, and if Black Torch kills everyone, their best lead to the real boss dies with them. Shiba will remain outside and command the operation, but there is one major problem. Once the team crosses the barrier, phones, radios, and every other normal means of communication will stop working. Fuyo therefore gives each of the three a lotus petal and tells them to swallow it. The petals will merge with their breathing and connect them to the lotus flower Fuyo keeps outside, allowing both sides to communicate almost without speaking aloud. Jiro and Reiji pick up the petals and even sniff them first like they are checking for pesticides, which immediately annoys Fuyo enough to tell both idiots to just swallow them already. With preparations complete, Shiba gives them one final instruction. Once inside, judge the situation for themselves and act accordingly. The three Black Torch members step into the fog. The Mononoke occupying Hirosaka detect Black Torch almost immediately. Naruko remains high above the town, single-handedly maintaining the massive barrier, while Kanawa continues treating human flesh like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Kanawa reports that they have captured around 200 people alive. Gathering them has been troublesome, but what they need is fresh life force. Corpses that have been dead too long are nearly worthless. Unfortunately, there is also a pile of severed heads sitting beside him. Roran has to remind Kanawa once again to stop leaving skulls everywhere after eating. Kanawa snaps back that human skulls are too hard, and chewing through them makes his jaw sore. Naruko then corrects their earlier report. There are not merely 3 intruders. There are 3 humans plus 1 animal. The moment Kanawa hears about Rago, his excitement spikes. Roran explicitly reminds him that their boss ordered them not to carelessly kill the Black Calamity Star. Kanawa, however, is already far too eager for a fight. The order enters one ear and leaves through the other as he declares that he will personally take Reigo's life. Inside the town, Jiro, Reiji, and Ichika discover civilians collapsed all over the streets without any significant physical injuries. Reiji suspects they are being controlled by some kind of technique. Rago traces the surrounding demonic energy and confirms 4 separate sources. One is maintaining the barrier, another is casting something on the civilians, and the remaining 2 are considerably stronger. Unfortunately, all the energy inside the barrier is tangled together like charging cables thrown into a backpack. Reigo can count the sources, but cannot pinpoint their exact locations. For the missing part of the plan, Jiro turns to his reliable network of animal friends. He feeds a flock of crows and recruits them as scouts. The temporary employees with wings prove surprisingly professional. Before long, they report 2 targets near the northern intersection and 2 more around the central park. Black Torch immediately divides its forces. Reiji and Ichika will head toward the intersection, while Jiro and Rago go to the park. Whichever side finishes first will circle around and support the others. The plan has barely been finalized when Kanawa crashes down from above like a meteor. Fortunately, all 3 manage to dodge. Jiro immediately changes the arrangement and volunteers to stay behind while the other 2 continue the mission. Kanawa is genuinely surprised that a human would willingly stay and fight him alone. Jiro has no interest in debating which species is superior. If Kanawa wants a fight, then he can come get one. Black Torch officially splits into 3 fronts. Ichika reaches the intersection where civilians are being controlled and finds Roran waiting for her. She orders him to release the technique immediately. Roran flatly refuses. At the park, Reiji finds Naruko sitting motionless high above them in an almost vacant state, but below her stands a hooded swordsman guarding the way. If Reiji wants to reach Naruko, he will have to get past this person first. Meanwhile, Jiro's fight with Kanawa begins in earnest. One side prefers using his head, while the other relies almost entirely on muscle. Kanawa charges straight forward with punches powerful enough to shatter the road beneath them. Jiro repeatedly dodges, observes, and quickly identifies a pattern. Kanawa's attacks are powerful and extremely direct, but every missed swing leaves his side exposed for a brief moment. Jiro baits out another strike, slips aside, and counters. Unfortunately, seeing the opening is not the same as having enough power to exploit it. Jiro's attacks barely penetrate Kanawa's defenses. Kanawa immediately pushes him back. Jiro calls on Rago, his right eye turning gold as black energy gathers into a gigantic arm and crashes forward in an attempt to end the fight quickly. Kanawa answers with raw strength of his own, stopping the attack head-on and mocking the supposedly legendary Black Calamity Star for being less impressive than expected. It turns out Kanawa has been holding back as well. He raises his demonic power to its maximum. His skin turns red, his arms swell enormously, and white armor forms over them. A single strike from this transformed state smashes Jiro straight into the road. Jiro feels as though an unbearable gravitational force is pinning him to the ground. Standing above the crater, Kanawa begins explaining why he hates humans. By his own admission, he has always been a crude kind of Mononoke. He was never talented with delicate supernatural techniques and has relied on overwhelming demonic power and brute force for as long as he can remember. The crushing sensation Jiro is experiencing is what Kanawa believes Mononoke have endured under humanity for centuries. Long ago, he says, humans worshipped him as a mountain demon god. They brought offerings and begged for protection, and in return, he guarded their land. In Kanawa's memories, those days were genuinely peaceful. Everything changed after the Oniwaban appeared. The same humans who had bowed before him joined forces with the agents and attempted to ambush him. Kanawa slaughtered them all, then used that betrayal as the foundation for everything he came to believe about humanity. Humans might smile and beg for protection today, then bring an entire hunting party to kill you tomorrow. This is still only Kanawa's perspective on what happened, but the hatred he carries is undeniably real. He believes Mononoke have tolerated humanity long enough. They waited for humans to forget how terrifying monsters could be. They waited for the Bureau to weaken. And now, he believes, the time has come for Mononoke to return to their true nature. Jiro is still forcing himself up from the crater when Kanawa completely loses interest in keeping Reigo alive. As far as he is concerned, if the Black Calamity Star is only this strong, then it is not worth whatever interest their boss has shown in it. At the same time, Roran has dragged Ichika through a floating stone gate and into another dimension. He casually warns her that falling from the platform will actually kill her. His technique allows him to directly interfere with a target's mind. He can give someone a pleasant dream or throw them into a nightmare just as easily. Human fear, joy, and panic are little more than entertainment to him. Unfortunately for Roran, Ichika is not an easy victim. She effortlessly avoids his rapid thrusts, and when he drives her toward the edge, she calmly catches his weapon and throws him over instead. The problem is that this world belongs to Rorin, so he can simply give himself wings and fly back up whenever he wants. As if that were not enough, he changes Ichika's combat outfit into a school uniform and excitedly considers trying several more costumes. Whatever his combat ability, the man is clearly committed to his career as a stylist. Ichika quickly understands that panicking only gives him exactly what he wants. Instead of wasting strength trying to destroy the entire illusion, she forces herself to remain calm and focuses on finding the person controlling it. While Rorin is still busy playing dress-up with the doll inside his imaginary world, Ichika activates the stealth function of her special operations uniform and disappears from sight. Rorin immediately loses track of her. Ichika circles into his blind spot, closes the distance, and reappears beside him. One slash cuts off his horn before he can react. The horn is the organ he uses to control his demonic energy, so the moment it is lost, his entire technique collapses. The false sky shatters, the illusionary world falls apart, and both of them return to the real street. The man who had been directing dreams and changing other people's outfits seconds earlier is now kneeling on the pavement, clutching his head. Jiro's battle remains far more dangerous. Kanawa continues pressing forward with his enormous arms. At a critical moment, Jiro uses an escape technique, leaving his special operations uniform behind like a discarded shell and dodging the attack. But the instant he appears in his new position, both Jiro and Reigo freeze. Black energy suddenly erupts with an intensity neither has experienced before. Claws form around Jiro, and a tail made entirely of demonic energy becomes visible behind him. Jiro asks Reigo what is happening, but even the cat has no idea. Then Jiro looks back at the discarded uniform and remembers that it was designed to neutralize demonic energy. Perhaps it was not merely protecting Jiro. All this time, it may also have been unintentionally suppressing Reigo's power. Kanawa charges again. Jiro reacts almost completely on instinct. An enormous mass of black energy erupts and crashes directly into Kanawa's frontal attack. This time, the result is completely different. Kanawa is blasted backward, his massive body torn apart into several pieces that scatter across the road. Jiro simply stares. He only intended to stop the attack. He never expected the counterstrike to literally blow his opponent apart. But defeating Kanawa creates an even more disturbing problem. Reigo begins reassessing his own condition. The Killing Stone had steadily eroded his demonic power throughout the years he remained sealed. Even after escaping, recovering that lost power should have taken a very long time. Yet his strength has returned far too quickly and may even be surpassing what he possessed in the past. The Special Operations uniform was only suppressing that power. It could not possibly have created the enormous amount of energy that just erupted. For a Mononoke's fundamental power to increase, it must absorb some kind of nourishment. Fuyo already explained exactly what can accomplish that. Human life force. That is when Reigo realizes something terrifying. The energy source he has needed all along has been right beside him from the beginning, Jiro. Reigo previously believed he only consumed life force during the moment he merged with Jiro to save his life. Now it appears the process never actually ended. Ever since the two began sharing a body, Reigo has been unconsciously absorbing Jiro's life force to rebuild his own power, and it may still be happening right now. Jiro knows nothing about the conclusion forming inside Reigo's mind. From his perspective, the only thing that has happened is that their combined power has suddenly received an absurd increase. On the final front, Reiji is facing something potentially even more dangerous. He stands before the hooded swordsman and orders him to drop his weapon and surrender. There is no response. The figure simply draws his sword. Pale violet demonic energy begins crawling along the blade. The stance alone is enough to make Reiji freeze. That sword is far too familiar. The way the opponent channels power is equally familiar. There is no possibility that Reiji is mistaken. Then a voice speaks from beneath the hood, and the expression on Reiji's face changes completely.